my friends. It's so good to see you again. I'm so excited to talk to you today. I have some stories for you, and you're going to love them. First off, happy Mabon! It's autumn equinox here in the northern hemisphere, and I want to share with you some stories of Mabon. Now, you might be asking yourself, what is Mabon? What does Mabon have to do with anything? Well, let me tell you about it. Once upon a time, long, long, long ago, there was a goddess named Modron, and Modron had a son named Mabon, and he was the most beautiful and bright child ever. And she held him and loved him, and then 3 days after he was born, he was stolen. And everyone was sad because Mabon was the god of light. He loved the light. He was a bright, sunshiny little kid. But he was gone, and the world was cast into shadow. But then King Arthur came, and he started looking for Mabon. He asked Modron, "Where's your son?" And she's like, "I don't know." And then he went and he asked the wise old owl. And the owl said, "I don't know, but there's somebody older than me that might have this knowledge. Let me take you to him." And they took him to the stag. And the stag was like, Who's Mabon again? I don't know. I've been here for a long time and I've never heard of a Mabon. So the stag said, "You know, I know of one who is way older than me. Let me take you to him." And they went to Eagle. And Eagle said, "I've flown all over these lands, but I've never, ever, ever seen a Mabon. So, wait. There is one more who is much older than me. Let me take you to him." And Eagle took the king to the Salmon of Knowledge. The Salmon of Knowledge said, "Okay, you know, I've been around a long time. And let me tell you, I think there's one person that may be Mabon. But I got to take you to him. And it's a long ways away." And so they traveled across the moors and over the hills, looking and trying to keep a sight for something so bright. And as they traveled, they went to a castle. And this castle was big, and it was dark. And in one little corner, there was a light in a window. That light was Mabon. So King Arthur, he went over to the castle and said, "Hey, are you Mabon?" And he heard, "Yeah, I'm Mabon." Well, not very becoming of any kind of a creature, if you ask me. I'm just going to say that right now. But King Arthur was like, "Oh, then you must be the one we are looking for. You're the brightest. You need to come with me to see your mother." And so King Arthur saved Mabon. And we celebrate now because this is the time where the light was removed from the sky. And it started to grow shorter and shorter days. And we started to get colder and colder and colder. And this reminds me of another story, another deity that had been taken from the land of the living. So let me tell you about that. First, I got to tell you, there was this very, very sacred fruit. It's an apple. Do you like apples? I know I love apples. I love apples. I love apples. They're so tasty. And this fruit was sacred to Carrie. And Carrie is the name of another goddess. And we love her very much. She's the summer and the spring, and she brings all the fruits and all of the flowers, and we just absolutely love that. But she's married to the Lord of the Underworld. And so when she left, she leaves us this one special reminder. If you cut open an apple, you'll find a 5 pointed star. We know those are sacred because it symbolizes the fire, the water, the earth, the air, and the spirit inside of us. So every time we cut open an apple, we can say, Io Kore. And that will remind us of how much awesome she was. I love apples, I'm just going to say. I'll save that one for later. So when she goes down into the underworld, one of the things that happens is that her mom gets really sad. Just like Modron got really sad when Mabon left. And these things make it so that in our stories, we have a reason for why things get dark. Because it's sad, and it can be sad sometimes. And it can be cold, and it feels like nothing ever is going to be good again. But we know that in 6 months, it'll change right back around. So I want to tell you another story. And this story deals with loss as well. And this is one of my favorites. Not because it's got a fairy or nothing, but it might be. She might be related to me. I'm just saying, okay. The Harp That Held Music by Jill Sattler. Written and illustrated. So in the place where Mabon comes from, and that's called Wales. That's the Celtic community. Those are the lands where we have the Irish, and we have the English, and we've got the Scottish, and we got the Welsh. And so I want to tell you about this tale. Look at that harp that she drew. Isn't that pretty? This book is dedicated to all of her family and a little girl she met on the Isle of Iona, Lily. It happened long ago, and long ago it happened, that in a small village a harp was strung, made from smoothed out bog oak, and that's oak that's found in a bog, that was found while cutting sod and turf. The husband toiled by the light of night, waxing and planing the oak into thin sheets, little teeny tiny paper thin sheets, making resin and combining them together. You squish them all together really well with a lot of resin in between, and they become solid. The husband, upon finishing the harp, hung it on the rafters to warm it and allow it time to dry. Well, look at that beautiful house that they lived in. Isn't that pretty? I want to live there with all of the moons on everything. And look there's my sister. She likes to play. You know, I would love to do that too. Where would you play if you were a fairy? Oh, yeah? Oh, that sounds like fun. So little did the farmer know that by night the fairies were watching him create that harp. One in particular, I'm not going to tell you who it was eager to play. For a fortnight, that's 2 weeks, the fairies would sit upon the wood and dip their toes in the resin, leaving a little teeny bit of fairy dust behind each time that they did that. They had no knowledge that they were in fact leaving magic behind in the newly made resin, nor on the bog oak that was soaking it up. Yeah, that bog oak really soaks up magic a lot. On the night of completion, one of the fairies chimed in, "Why are we coming here every night for a fortnight to look at some useless harp? We have plenty of musical instruments back in our own place that you know." The tall one, the very tallest one, I'm not telling you who that was, looked at her companion and said, "This harp is special, connected in a way I cannot understand." And after saying so, she sat and played the most haunting of melodies on the harp. This tune echoed through the cottage and into the dreams of those who slept. Look at those fairies. You can tell they were waiting for the light. Oh, because they did not know about the dust in the resin, they didn't know about the harp's new ability. On the following morning, the husband took the harp down from the rafters, that's the ceiling parts, and gave it to the wife. It's still wet. We want to wait at least another night to see if it dries. I am sure by morning it will be ready for you to play." Well, that night, the fairies came again. This time the tall ones sat down and played the sweetest of melodies, and it wafted through the house and into the dreams of those that were asleep in the cottage. The next morning, the husband took the harp down, and he realized it was still not dry. It was sticky. "Oh, good wife, this resin is still wet in a couple of places. And, surely it will break to pieces if you put any pressure on the strings." Well, even though the wife was desperate to play the harp, she listened to her husband, who never steered her wrong, and waited patiently. "Till the morrow, then, good husband." That evening, the husband hung the harp up in the rafters again. He stoked the fire with lots of extra turf to warm the rafters. That's the stuff that you burn. And fell asleep by the fire. The fairies returned for a second night. "Why do we keep coming back? You have played the harp. Let us go home and celebrate with a bottle of elderberry wine." "Just one more night," said the tall fairy, for she knew she would not be able to make a trip that third night. Some things fairies just know. She played the most sorrowful melody of all, and it crept into the dreams of all of those who were asleep in the cottage. Upon morning, the husband took the harp down from the rafters and handed it to the good wife. "Here now, practice plucking away, and soon you will have a tune to play with us in the evening time." Now, the good wife had never learned a musical instrument ever, and she could not play at all. And she didn't know anything other than like a couple of tunes that she knew as a kid. La 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 la, taco la la, Or maybe it was the one that was like, do do do, do do do, do do do. I don't know. I can't remember those ones. But she sat down on the fireside stool and started to play the most haunting melody ever. Ooh. "Wife, have you been playing while I am at work in the field with the resin as wet as it was?" Even before speaking it, he knew it was an absurd thought. There was no way that she would have played that. "Good husband, I have never played music before this day." And she set to playing the tune again. All day and into the wee hours of the evening. She played it all day long. Can you believe that? Fingers must have been sore. Upon the second day, she awoke and sat down to play her harp. She was ready. She started playing, and she played the sweetest of all melodies that she'd ever heard. Na, 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 na. "Now, good wife, surely you have been fooling me all of these years. You've been playing for years. I have never heard this before. How is it that you can play the harp?" Even before speaking, he knew in his heart that she'd never ever done this before, but doubt was creeping in. "No, good husband, I have never heard this song before, yet here I play it just as surely as you stand there now." She played that song all day and all night long. That night they slept the sweetest that they'd ever slept, and they had wonderful dreams. In the third night, she awoke and sat down to play her harp, and she played the most sorrowful of melodies that she had ever heard. "Good wife, surely something has bewitched you. For these 3 days you have played this harp without knowing a single note of music. Where is this coming from?" "My good husband, you have known me since I was a child no taller than my daddy's knee. I do not know where this gift has come from, but I know that a gift it is. The time has come, good wife, to put away the harp and tend to the fire," he himself said. "The fire is cold, the children are thinning, and we have turf to bring in. Look at the harp, isn't it beautiful? Don't you want to play it?" I know I would. So she tried doing her chores. Tried. But before too long, she was back at that harp and she was playing it. And it was those same 3 tunes that the fairy had put inside of it. Finally, when the fire had become completely desperate, it needed more wood and more turf than you could imagine. She finally threw her harp into the fire to teach her a good lesson. Ugh. But what happened was quite the opposite of what the husband had hoped for. Instead of burning like wood, it flamed bluish purple and played the very first tune that the fairy had placed in it, the haunting melody. "Husband, take it out of the fire!" she called. "Ah, no. But before the husband could snatch the harp, it had played the last note of the very first song. Try as she might, she could never play that haunting song ever again. She plucked and strained, but the chords escaped her. After an hour of trying, she remembered the tune that her mother used to hum and began playing that instead. She set the harp down, tended to the fire, and made food for the family. The next morning, the good wife tried to work on her chores. Good wife, the turf needs drying, the children's clothes need mending, and our potatoes need to be dug out from the field. She set about to do her chores and wound up sitting by the fire, plucking her harp, with the sweetest melody that she had ever heard coming forth. Once again, the husband threw the harp into the fire, and it flamed a bright bluish purple. And it played the second song. "Husband, quick, snatch it out of the fire!" Ah! But before he could, the last note of the second song played. And once again, she could never play the sweetest song she'd ever heard. Then she remembered a song that her grandmother used to hum and began to play that instead. She then set the harp down and went about her chores. The third day was the same thing altogether. She tried to do her chores, but the harp found its way into her hands, and she could not do anything but play. And her husband grabbed the harp and threw it back into the fire. And all of the notes of the third song, the most sorrowful tune, played. Try as she might, she could not find the notes to any of the 3 songs. None of them. She remembered a song that her aunt used to hum her while walking along on the road, and she began to play that tune on the harp. Once she was finished, she sat down and was busy about her chores. Days passed into weeks, and weeks passed into months, months into years, and the harp was never again tossed into the fire. Ever. Look at how much time goes by. And that's the way that can happen. She did her chores and remembered day by day a new tune that a friend would have played, or a relative would have done, or a neighbor that had hummed anything she'd heard in her life. She would play those songs, plucking away at them until she was satisfied, then set the harp down and went about her daily chores. After more than 100 years had passed, she laid on her deathbed, holding the hand of her most treasured granddaughter. She told her the tale of the 3 songs, and how it would lift her spirits to know those songs once again. She gifted her granddaughter Rua with the harp, knowing full well that those tunes were gone forever. And that is the passing of the notes of music from one generation to another. What she did not know was that the fairy came back to see what had become of the harp after all those years ago, and listened to the old woman tell the tale. The fairy had forgotten how connected she once was to the harp. She sat down, and the first night after everyone had gone to sleep, she played that haunting melody again, and it echoed through the house and into the dreams of everyone who was asleep. The next morning, Rua played the tune for the old woman. "Oh, child, You have prepared my mind for the journey to Tir na n. It has been so long since I have heard that tune. Wherever did you find it? Well, it was in my dream, Grandmama. That evening, the fairy returned again, and this time, she played the sweetest melody once more. The melody wafted through the cottage and into the dreams of those who slept, and the next morning, the child played it for the old woman. Oh, my sweet child, my heart, you have prepared me for my journey, that I have longed to hear that tune once more. Where did you learn that song? It came to me in a dream, Grandmama. That night, the fairy came for the final time and played the most sorrowful tune. Then it crept through the house, all through the cottage, and into the dreams of everyone there. Once again, Rua awoke and played the old woman the song. But this time, the fairy had not left. She had fallen asleep by her own music and was curled up in the bottom of the harp. She awoke and rubbed her eyes as the child played the melody and listened to the conversation. Oh, my child, you have set my soul at rest. My journey is beginning, and yet the light has not dimmed from my eyes. My body has grown cold with death yet, and I fear I will live in this cage for eternity. Play that song again. The fairy knew at once what had happened. Somehow, her magic seeped into the old harp, and in turn, seeped into the old woman. After Rua climbed into bed with one eye on the fire and another on her grandmother, the fairy made herself known to the old woman. Look at those wings. Do you see it? Enjoying my songs now, are we? The old woman rubbed her tired, wrinkled eyes with her crippled hands. Why, sure they be. I never, the fairy spoke. 'Twas my songs put into the harp, old woman, and my songs you could not play, for fairies have a way of knowing about things. The old woman spoke. I cannot leave this body, fairy. The magic has trapped me inside it for far too long. I feel myself has already passed, though my soul longs to be free. Can you help me? Now, fairies are tricksy folk, and sure she would help her, but now not up front, like, we don't do that. You gotta, there's a little bit, what's in it for me, old woman? What's in it for me? For you have given me nothing, and me songs 3. The old woman thought, and she thought. And as old as she was, her thinking took a while. I will give you songs 3, as you have given me. For the old woman had been playing music for such a long time that she could pluck one out of thin air. The 3 that you play me must be the same as mine. 1 haunting, 1 sweet, and 1 sorrowful. And so help me, if I have heard any of them, you will stay caged in your body for all eternity. Well, the old woman sat at her harp and closed her tired eyes. And she thought back to an evening when the fog had settled over the valley and the hounds were giving a mournful cry. Oh! She played a melody so haunting that the fairy began to shake. Surely you have stolen that from a fairy, for no mortal could play it as well. I will accept it, for I've never heard of it. Oh, look at this poor hound baying. This poor sad, sad hound. the old woman closed her eyes again and thought of the sweetest, of her great, great, great grandchild. And when her great, great, great granddaughter was born, and she played the softest, sweetest melody, as if honey dripped from the fairy's ears. Ugh, old woman, you have stolen that one as well. But I have not heard it, so I'll accept it. One more, and I'll set you free. Look at the honey as it drips from the bee. This is my favorite. I love the honey, especially those songs. She closed her eyes one final time and thought back to the day that her dear, good husband had passed. How brown his eyes had been, and how her heart had broken into tiny little pieces all about the floor when the news came of his departure. So she sat to play the most sorrowful tune, if there was one. And it was so sorrowful that it set the fairy to flailing about and wailing on the floor with tears and moans. Oh, the sad pelican preening. Is that not sad? Very sorrowful. Surely, a bit of magic has stayed in your bones. And just then, the fire flared a bright, bluish purple, and the harp sung by itself. Rua rubbed her eyes as she watched her grandmother fade into the hearth, hand in hand with the fairy, and looking oh so young and beautiful. As the two faded away, a single tear slid down Rua's cheek. Oh, look at that lovely hearth fire. And the cat. Cats have a way of knowing, too. She then took up the harp and played an old song her grandmama had used to hum, the most haunting, sweetest, sorrowful melody she had ever heard. And is that not the wonderful tale? And remember, all things come and go in their time. Now, I'm not saying I was there, but I have to tell you that that is one of my favorite tales. And now you see the fairy dipping her foot in the resin. Thank you for coming tonight, and I hope that you've enjoyed my tales. And don't forget to get your apple and enjoy. See you later. Have a great day.